I would like to call to order the February 12th, 2024 regular school board meeting of Community Unit School District 303 at 6 o'clock p.m. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mrs. Bell is absent. She is actually on her way in. Mr. Kuschert?
Here.
Mr. Lackner?
Here.
Mr. Lentz?
Here.
Mrs. McCabe?
Here.
Mr. McNally?
Here.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Here. Please stand for the pledge to the flag. And now I would like to move to citizen comments at this time. Mr. Lackner, would you please read the preliminary comment?
I will, thank you. During the public comment period, members of the public body who wish to speak are asked to first state their name and the community in which they reside. Each individual will have up to 3 minutes to address the board on a topic of their choosing. We ask all individuals who address the board to do so with respect and civility toward others. Please note that personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. We also want to inform our speakers that all regular, special, and committee meetings are live streamed and available for viewing at any time on the district's YouTube channel. Personal information should be considered before making a statement that will be recorded and made public. While the board will not respond to today's public comment during this meeting, we are committed to listening to you to help support our work for the district and on behalf of students, families, staff, and community members.
Thank you, Mr. Lackner. I would like to invite forward our first speaker, Ashley Ward.
Hello. My name is Ashley Ward. I'm a resident of the Timbers, and I, along with many neighbors, have spoken over the phone with all of you this past week, so thank you for taking the time to hear our comments. I stand here in front of you again to ask the board moves forward with revised Concept 2 or what will be presented as the new Concept 5, both of which keep Timbers at Wild Rose. You have all heard our concerns, and you've all been very understanding through the process about why we belong at Wild Rose. Some of you have even walked the path to the school from our neighborhood, which we really appreciate. You've seen firsthand how close and connected we are, and we've received verbal feedback from most of the board members with the support to keep Timbers at Wild Rose. The administration had presented some data and projections at last week's board meeting that caused some concern about potential overcrowding. With administration's projection of 49 students from the Timbers, their data showed that it would put an overcapacity into the 24-25 year. However, RSP has used a projection of 41 students coming from the Timbers throughout this whole process. So if you look at this data again, including the Timbers at Wild Rose, but instead you use RSP's projection, then Wild Rose would be just at capacity and not over. Further, the Timbers neighborhood has taken it upon ourselves to determine how many actual students we have that will be attending. We surveyed the neighborhood, and I've given you each a copy of those results. As you can see, there will be 37 students in elementary school from the Timbers this upcoming year, keeping Wild Rose under capacity with a total of 529. In any of these projections, the 24-25 school year shows the highest enrollment at Wild Rose, and then all the numbers continue down. It would make no sense to move an entire neighborhood of children away from their current school for being close to and not over capacity for 1 year. I encourage you to look closely at all of the data. With the administration's projection of 49 versus 41 from RSP and 39 from our actual neighborhood survey, the numbers vary a little bit. I encourage the board to take all of this into consideration when you look at the capacity numbers. There's also been a little concern over cap and send, not wanting to put Wild Rose in that position. If you look at the actual count of the 37 students from our neighborhood, Wild Rose would still remain under capacity, but even if cap and send were to become needed, my question to the board and the administrators would be, why would you prefer to uproot 37 students from their current school where they have activities, friends, and have built their relationships with teachers and staff there versus an unknown number of potential new students that may move in? Again, thank you all for your time. I encourage you to review all the data very carefully to see that keeping the Timbers at Wild Rose will not put them into an overcrowding situation. It will allow our students to continue to walk or bike to school, and it will keep the Wild Rose and Timbers neighborhoods connected. Geographically, it only makes sense for the Timbers to attend Wild Rose. So please make a decision that will last long-term, so we're not doing this again in a few years. Thank you.
Thank you. I would ask Amanda Morales forward.
Hello, I'm Amanda Morales, also from the Timbers neighborhood. Thank you for so many of you who I've spoken with this past week. Really appreciate the time. Again, I echo everything that Ashley just said. Here alongside my neighbors to continue to advocate for the Timbers students to go to Wild Rose, our walkable, bikeable, scooterable, if that's a word, school of almost 40 years. We heard last week from Dr. Gordon, the week prior from Dr. Igo, that it works. It works to keep our kids at Wild Rose. In the recommended concept from administration, which is concept 2, we see Anderson, Coron, Davis, Fersen Creek, Richmond, and Wasco all having the same or being in worse situations when it comes to available flex space. So I say if we're able to make it work for those schools, I would also ask that we make it work for Wild Rose. If it comes down to a numbers game, we have what I think is an easy solution. We can easily move the Beckett's Landing subdivision to Munhall. This is brand new construction. It is split between U46 and D303. The D303 side has just begun construction. It is years away from being fully developed. It is an 11-minute drive from Beckett's Landing to Wild Rose and a 15-minute drive from Beckett's Landing to Munhall. A difference of 4 minutes. These students will need to be bused regardless. They can't walk like our kids can. They don't have an existing relationship with Wild Rose. They have no connection to the neighborhood. Their kids don't have friendships or relationships with staff and teachers, but our kids do. This change can not only help offset the numbers at Wild Rose, but it can also help offset some of the concerns that we had last week about too much flex space being at Munhall, and then also it teetering on that Title I classification. The homes at Beckett's Landing are going for over $500,000 on the D303 side, so these are not low-income properties by any means. No, this has been a very challenging process for all of us, parents included, so appreciate you guys hearing from our community, taking all of our feedback, updating the drafts as needed throughout this process. At the end of the day, we've heard that none of the concepts check all of the boxes that we were set out here to achieve. So ask if we can't achieve everything on the list, that we can at least impact the fewest amount of families. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I would like to ask Elise Rehak forward, please.
Hello, my name is Elise Rehak, also from the Timbers neighborhood. I want to thank you for your continued consideration of the Timbers neighborhood. I truly believe. I'm tall. I truly believe. Better? Okay. Keeping our neighborhood at Wild Rose continues to be a consideration due to our proximity to our neighborhood school. Many of you had read emails, messages, made time for phone calls to hear once again why we truly believe in advocating for our neighborhood to stay together at Wild Rose. We sincerely thank you for all of the time and do not take lightly the efforts you've made to hear our concerns. Our proximity to Wild Rose is significant. I was standing at the bus stop Tuesday morning after the meeting last week, talking with neighbors, and heard the bell at Wild Rose for school to start. I couldn't help but laugh, but also be reminded of why we are so passionate and continue to speak to you. Some of you have come out to Timbers Park and walked the path to the school and communicated that only helped you better understand why we believe we are part of Wild Rose neighborhood and should attend that school. Having us attend a different school isolates our neighborhood and continues to do so until we are reunited with surrounding communities at St. Charles North, as hopefully Concept 2 for high school is voted through tonight. We are not at all geographically connected with the neighborhoods in Concept 2 Elementary and seem to be the only neighborhood of very close proximity to a school that has been suggested to move due to capacity concerns. Staying at our neighborhood school keeps us with the Wild Rose neighborhood through the entirety of their schooling, continuing our belief that Wild Rose is our school. The board established the primary criteria of keeping neighborhoods together for very important reasons. You believed it was a significant consideration in changing boundaries, and we believe it is vital for our children's sense of community. The administration presented the potential impact of keeping our Timbers community intact at Wild Rose based on several hypothetical scenarios. Please do not cause a guaranteed disruption of our children's lives for a situation that is based on marginal capacity for 1 year. Considering the use of classrooms with Timbers included at Wild Rose, there are 6 other elementary schools with similar, some with fewer classrooms in Concept 2. There's no conversation about moving children from a walkable distance from those schools, just Wild Rose. Anderson, Coron, Wasco, Davis, Fearson, Richmond do not have the ideal flex space as indicated by the administration. To say that we impact space, then continue to vote for a plan that approves 6 schools with the same or less space doesn't make sense. With the later start times next year, families have talked about the increased time to walk and bike to school, meeting up with our Wild Rose neighbors along the way. Many of you have communicated support and conversations for us to stay at our neighborhood school. I implore you to act on those statements and move forward with a concept to vote tomorrow that does just that. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you for those comments. May I ask Sean Baker forward, please?
Good evening. I think I've spoken with a good amount of you on the phone, and I appreciate you taking that time. I'm here once again to express my support for the Timbers neighborhood to continue being associated with the Wild Rose Elementary School. Specifically, I advocate for either revised Concept 2 or Concept 5. As previously communicated through comments and emails, our neighborhood has a deep connection with Wild Rose, and the Timbers is essentially synonymous with the Wild Rose neighborhood. Some of you may have visited the Timbers Park and walked the paths that connecting our neighborhoods. My neighbors directly behind me are part of the Wild Rose community. Our proximity to the school is such that the Timbers neighbors walk or ride their bikes to school, and the sound of the bell even reaches their backyards. It's important to remember that the presented concepts were positioned as initial drafts, open to adjustments based on feedback. In early discussions, it was evident that moving the Timbers out of Wild Rose was a significant oversight, as noted by some residents. I urge you to cast your vote in favor of the revised Concept 2 or Concept 5, allowing the Timbers to remain with Wild Rose. During previous meetings, concerns were raised about the possibility of specials being on carts, and however, as parents, we are aware that this is already occurring due to the increased frequency of specials each week. In revised Concept 2, there are still designated spaces for art, music, and empower, while others in the Timbers community have highlighted numerical discrepancies, such as an extra kindergarten section. I won't dwell on those points. I'd also like to point out, in the 7 years my children have attended Wild Rose, we've not heard of a shift of classrooms to accommodate an injured child. Despite the limited ground floor classrooms due to the school's design, children with injuries have managed as well as they could. Additionally, we have reached out to the builder of Beckett's Landing and the new development in South Elgin mapped into Wild Rose. While projections for that neighborhood are unknown, currently there are no D303 residents, with about 7 houses in progress, 3 with only foundations, and an 8-month build time. It's reasonable to assume that few students from that neighborhood will be attending for the 24 to 25 year, and it will be a few more years until it's fully built. In the past week, my fellow neighbors and I have reached out to every board member, and at least 5 have explicitly expressed their support for keeping the Timbers with Wild Rose. Additionally, one member has indicated that they would be open to this position if it aligns with the majority of the board, bringing our count to 6. While I understand the importance of approaching 7 votes for a consensus on a single concept, it seems we are close to achieving that. In conclusion, I strongly urge you to vote in favor of either Concept 2 or Concept 5, ensuring that the Timbers remain connected with its neighborhood school, Wild Rose. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather Austin, please.
Hi there. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. No? A little down? Oh, okay. See, I thought I'd try to be funny, and this is what happens. Okay, my name is Heather Austin, and I reside in the Aintree neighborhood. I have a 4th grader, a 3rd grader, and a kindergartner currently at Norton Creek. On my way out the door this evening, my 3rd grade girl told me to try real hard so she can stay at her school. So this is me standing here doing everything I can to make that happen. I want to commend the board for requesting additional data points and including Aintree and Concepts 4 and 5 that will be discussed tonight You don't know how much I appreciate that. Thank you for not settling for good enough. Concepts 2 and revised Concept 2 are not good enough for the school, for the kids in our district. Regarding concerns about underutilization, which I believe Mr. Lentz brought up last week at the meeting, in those revised concepts for tonight, moving the Springs at St. Charles, it has not started renting units yet and won't until March. Moving that division, or subdivision, sorry, to Munhall will help negate any potential underutilization of that building. Consideration could also be given to the Lakes of St. Charles on Foxfield, which is currently in Concepts 4 and 5 still zoned for Norton Creek. This new development is across from Kingswood and under construction with no one residing there. Single-family homes, about 100 units. As you're considering all concepts tonight, please remember Concept 2 displaces the most students in our district. I'm going to repeat that. It displaces the most students from our existing, or from their existing schools, which is over 900 kids being moved out of their elementary school that they know and love. This is detrimental to the well-being of the most students in our district. That's just plain math. I'm asking you to support Concepts 4 or 5, and please keep Aintree at Norton Creek. Please move the least amount of kids possible. I wrote this before I knew that Timbers was not included in Concept 4, so now I'm all in on 5. Thanks.
Thank you. May I ask Sarah Barthel forward, please?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I've emailed most of you this past week, and many have replied, and I appreciate that. I'm here with a slightly different take on the boundary argument. I've stayed quiet for most of the time while watching, because I do feel like within 3 weeks of our next school year, most of our students will be well-adjusted and happy, as most kids in D303 are. However, as you guys start to move forward with different maps, I noticed an alarming pattern happening with Munhall and some of the other schools that are being underutilized. By underutilizing these schools, you are putting our special education students at great risk. By not having a school that's going to guarantee that these students have the support staff that they need. Once a school goes below 70%, having a full-time speech, resource, OT, counselor, has been my understanding that that becomes a possibility of going part-time. I have a third grader at Munhall Elementary School who is utilizing all 4 of those. By not having those resources available to her and to any other special ed student in our district, you are putting those students at risk for not fulfilling their goals and for not becoming the students that they could potentially be. And that is not the district that D303 is. So I'm asking that you go back tonight as you discuss and look at where you think you can add more utilization to the buildings, because this boundary process should be beneficial to every student in D303, not just the ones with parents that have been complaining here this entire time. And then for the rest of my time, my daughter, my third grader, has been listening to the board meetings as I've been broadcasting them at home, and she's written her own letter to you. Dear board, my name is Ruby Laura Barthel. I am in 3rd grade at Munhall Elementary School. I am writing this because I have to tell you something. I have dyslexia, and it means that my brain thinks differently than my classmates. To help me learn, a lot of teachers support me and help me do math, like my Miss O'Hara. Miss O'Hara has made a big difference for me this year. I know a lot of kids are changing schools next year, and this makes me sad. But I've heard Munhall might not be a good school for students who think like me anymore, because we might lose some of our helping teachers, and this makes me feel worse. You need to think about my needs. And if you don't think about me, you will teach other kids that it is okay to not be nice to me. And this is not okay. I'm writing this to ask you if you can change the maps for me so that Munhall stays a good school for kids like me. Every school should be a good school for kids that have needs. Remember me when you choose a map tonight, Ruby.
Thank you. I would like to ask Rebecca Beal forward, please.
My name is Rebecca Beal. I have 3 kids at Wild Rose. I live in the Timbers as well. I just wanted to give you a little backstory here. So when I was going to school, K through 8, I went to a parochial school in West Chicago, and then I went to the public school for high school. So I went from a graduating class of 10 to an incoming freshman class of 650. It was incredibly difficult, actually, for all of my brothers and my sisters. You don't know anybody. You don't know the teachers, you don't know the school. Everybody has their friends, their cliques, their sports. And to try and find your way in that is a really, really difficult thing to do. So fast forward to my adulthood, we had kids. I used to live in Winfield, and we decided to move to St. Charles when my son was 5 so that he could go to kindergarten and have the same cohort from kindergarten all the way through high school, because I knew how important that was. Having struggled myself, I didn't want that for my children. The Timbers is walkable to Wild Rose, as you know. You also know that the number of accidents that occurred from our neighborhood to Wild Rose was 3 this last year. From our neighborhood to Munhall and the streets that would likely be used, it's 50, over 50. So that puts our kids at physical risk. The move to a different school where they'd have to make new friends, new teachers, is gonna present that emotional, that social emotional risk. We have established relationships with the teachers and with the classmates. You know, there's kids in 3rd grade and 4th grade that still go to Mrs. Thompson in kindergarten to get their teeth pulled because they know her, they know that she loves doing that, so it's just something that they do. So to pull them from that kind of intimate relationship with the school just seems like a really terrible idea at a tender age of 4th grade, 5th grade. Because we have an established relationship with a school, and we're talking about future developments where we don't know how many kids are going to be living there. So it just seems like the least appropriate thing to do to move that established neighborhood in lieu of something that we don't know what the future holds. You know, people move out, people move in. So I just beg you guys to think about all the impacts that your decision here tonight holds. And if you can, we would very much appreciate it if you could keep the Timbers at Wild Rose Elementary. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to ask Bobby Rail forward, please.
Good evening, Board and Dr. Gordon. Here we are again. I would ask you tonight to either support 2 or the slight revision to 2, which simply puts the Timbers back into Wild Rose, an area that is less than 5 minutes from that school. I am not in favor of 4 and 5, and I hope that you will not support 4 or 5. And the reason is that there are 3 new developments in Norton Creek. The Springs, for instance, is within a mile of the school. They will have 19 to 35 students, more on the 19 end. That should go to Norton Creek. And there are 2 other areas as well that one has already started to move in and one will start in March. They belong to the Norton Creek attendance area, east of Kurt. The 2 areas, Aimtree and Squire Lane, belong at Fox Ridge. They were there before the school closed. They meandered out to Norton Creek. That was not in the plan. The plan fell apart, and I do not want to see a deja vu. They belong at Fox Ridge. They are not in the Norton Creek planning area. And if they don't go to Fox Ridge, that utilization will drop from 82 to 73%, as Thomas pointed out. If they stay at Norton Creek, they will overcrowd a school that is not their attendance area. That is plain and simple. So please do not support 4 or 5 that would allow Aimtree and the Squires to stay at Norton Creek. Either zero in on 2 or 2 revised at the recommendation of the superintendent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. May I ask Terry Mikelski?
It's a difficult name. You did a good job. but
Sorry about that.
It's all good. Good evening. I'm here to speak on behalf of the students and parents in the special education community within D303. My name is Terry McCann-Mahalski, and I have 2 8th grade students at Redling. I have sent emails to the board as well as to other members within the district, and I want to thank Dr. Gordon for his thoughtful response and let him know that the special education parents community has seen his response and appreciates it. Tonight, we want to ask you to consider the individual needs of all students within the district and how best to support students equitably once the boundaries are set. Are we making sure that all students are having all of their individual needs met? So is there enough SEL in the district? Are there enough support staff? Are we making sure that we are communicating with parents? Are we being transparent? Are we making sure that we are involving parents when we are making changes to the programs and delivery methods within the district for things like RISE, STRIVE, the IN program? Are we making sure that we have support staff, educators, and everybody within the buildings trained appropriately, and are they getting enough support? Do they have enough time to be able to implement all the various different plans and programs that they need to do within their own classrooms? Are they able to read the plans appropriately? And there's a lot going on in these individual classrooms. Do they know everything about these individual students enough to be able to implement all the plans properly? Because if we're going to be looking at inclusiveness in all of these classrooms, you're putting a lot of students with a lot of different plans in these programs. Do they have enough support to be able to do that properly? And that impacts not just special education students, that's impacting your gen ed students, your gifted students, your twice exceptional students. That impacts everybody. And most especially, it's going to impact all of your parents across the district. It's going to impact all of your teachers too. Are you going to be able to retain teachers? Are you going to be able to keep bringing teachers in? But also, we have transportation issues within the district. I know we're looking at purchasing new buses. We're getting mini buses to alleviate some of the special education issues with the buses because we are currently using an outside service to do that. But there are still issues with that too. You know, are we making sure that we have TAs on the buses? And again, we all want to partner with the community here and with the board, with the district, to make sure that we are all working together. So I thank you very much for your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. May I invite Jeremy Durst forward, please?
Good evening, everybody. Jeremy Durst. I live in unincorporated Elburn, and I have a daughter that attends Wasco. As a father and a professional in law enforcement that deals with juvenile investigations, I wanted to speak just about internet safety briefly. I know there's a ton of comments about the boundaries, which I know is a big deal, but I think the internet safety affects every one of us in here with students that attend these schools. It was a topic that got brought up as a fellow parent talked to me about it, and when I looked at my daughter's Chromebook over the weekend, they had free access to pretty much a ton of the websites. I don't feel like an elementary school student should have the access to a YouTube. And when I started asking questions to some of the administrators, they direct me to the board. So I just wanted to come here just to speak about it and try to work together collaboratively. I know it's difficult, but I'd like to just sit down with everybody and try to make them aware of it. Is there something we can do to try to better these kids? We talk about the social, emotional, and this is a large part of it. So if we can sit down and look at it, if a kid goes home over the weekend and looks up topics that we shouldn't be allowing them, there's ways, there's technology for our students when they connect back to our Wi-Fi at the schools, they're able to see that and they're able to get alert out to law enforcement, because law enforcement in this capacity is just behind the 8 ball, and working with the school districts, if we can get that technology in place, we'll be able to hopefully help these kids before it's too late. So if we can just try to get the technology in place and look at it and probe into our IT, it'd be a huge aspect for all of our students, and I think it'd be beneficial. So I just want to thank everybody, thank every one of you for being here, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Diana Solstice.
Good evening, I'm Diana Soltis. I'm a St. Charles resident, and I appreciate all that the board does because I understand that it is not an easy job, and with the boundaries, there is a no-win situation. My heart goes out to the families who are here because my own sons were impacted for quite some years from boundary changes, and there's no perfect solution. But I'm not here tonight to talk about boundaries necessarily. It was a very interesting week last week in relation to D303 and my phone being lit up from a number of friends, colleagues, concerned citizens. I got contacted as to whether migrants were living in the schools or in any D303 facilities, and I said I would check into it. One board member said absolutely not and seemed very frustrated by the question. Another said that they didn't believe so but would look into it for me. Whether or not that's the case, and that's true, and I certainly hope it's not, I hope that, well, as a result, it would pose a number of questions. And I know you can't answer questions tonight, so I'll be following up in other capacities. But how many migrants are entering D303 monthly? What's the protocol for receiving migrants? What about providing residency proof? What do parents and guardians enroll the children? Are fees waived, et cetera? How many free breakfasts and reduced lunch are being provided, and how many Chromebooks have been issued? Are there other services that are being issued? And if so, a bigger question, who's paying for those costs? Is it the residents and taxpayers? Are there state funds, federal funds? Additionally, how has this influx of migrants affected these boundary decisions, if at all? And I suspect that it has. This does not appear to be a situation that's going to dissipate anytime soon. So what are the district's plans for the situation? Another concerned citizen informed me that they contacted school officials asking whether migrants were being housed in any school facilities, and the response was, "I don't understand your question." Now, that's a very straightforward response. It's either a yes or a no. So I'll outline my request. I would like D303 students and residents put first, whether that's resources, boundary decisions, like keeping kids walking or anything else. We're the ones paying for everything. Be fully transparent in all cases to everyone if you expect your constituents to trust you. Put academics first, and that means reading, math, English, real science, real social studies, and real history. And please do not support the proposed House Bill 4876, which is, in my opinion, a hostile attack on parents' rights. Parents should be in control of the decisions that affect their children, and all efforts to keep parents at the forefront, well-informed, and the primary decision makers should be first and foremost. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you for those comments. May I invite Mark Trittel? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, my name is Mark Tetry, and I am 14 months retired from a 43-year career in corporate sales. I live in Sugar Ridge. I had 2 sons that graduated from St. Charles North, and I got a little different twist tonight. I'd like to give you amazing people who work very hard some counsel. My career was very successful based upon a lot of counsel I received from top salespeople, top vice presidents. I really listened to them, and I took that and I tried to apply it. And I took a sales position that was focused on wisdom, because when you're working with customers, you really have to understand. I mean, if we all want to learn from the best. And this board right here, there's no doubt you all have the passion and the spirit to give our kids the best education, the learning and the wisdom you want to apply. You know, my heart goes out to all these parents back here tonight, because I don't have those challenges today. I have 7 grandkids. They're homeschooled. My wife and I help in that. But again, when you want to learn from the best, I mean, think about it. If any of us had a very talented high school basketball player, we would want wisdom from who? The GOAT, Michael Jordan, wouldn't we? We'd all want Michael Jordan to do that. Here's the challenge that I have for this board tonight is, and again, I go back and you know, my father was a retired assistant principal at John Hersey High School in 1992. He has passed. But I understand a lot of the challenges you guys have, because he brought those home, and I still remember them, and it was tough on him. But here's what I would like to impart on all of you tonight is the challenge I have. There's 31 days in March. And your main goal, which I believe is true, is to educate our kids, allow them to learn good, but provide them with incredible wisdom so they can continue and hopefully be successful like probably everybody in here tonight. And if you're going to go to find wisdom, why wouldn't we go to the wisest man who ever lived? Solomon. There's 31 days of March. There's 31 Proverbs. Proverbs 19:20 says, "Listen to counsel and receive instruction, that you may be wise in your days." Here's what I would challenge you, and I've been doing this for 2 years. March 1st, Proverbs 1. March 2nd, Proverbs 2. March 31st, if you do that, I guarantee you, you're going to look at things differently. You're going to have a lot of empathy behind me with parents, and I think you'll make some amazing decisions. Thank you so much for this time.
Thank you very much for those comments. May I invite forward Bonnie Crockett?
Hi, my name's Bonnie Crockett. I live in the Aidentree neighborhood. I have one child that attends D303. I come to you with a different request. It has to do with the boundaries, but I ask that you consider what these children going into 5th grade have been through. They started kindergarten and were ripped out of the school for COVID. They spent the beginning of their elementary and learning careers upside down. Teacher after teacher has told me that my son's class is so far behind socially because of what they went through with COVID. These children finally in the last year and a half have had a normal social situation in the schools. They're starting to actually have group work. Even last year they were doing group reading via Skype. They're sitting across the room from kids that they're doing group reading with on a computer. They're finally starting to have some normalcy, and now these 5th grade kids, hundreds of them, have the potential to be ripped out of their school and forced to switch schools twice in 2 years, going to middle school the following year. I understand the problems with a legacy program. I get it, and I understand there's the opportunity to write letters, but I just beg you to give special consideration to the 5th and ideally the 4th grade kids whose educational beginnings were traumatic. They were not normal. These kids deserve your support to at least finish elementary school with some sense of normalcy before they're turned upside down in their adolescent years again in middle school. So I just ask that you reconsider the legacy program some way, somehow. I know it's a lot to ask. I would support option 5, but that's really not my point here. I think there's a lot of people, right? You guys aren't going to make everyone happy. I just ask that you give a little special consideration to the kids who have already had their lives turned upside down. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. And thank you for all of the citizen comments. We appreciate that you took the time to do so tonight, whether just attending or coming and making comments. Moving onward with the agenda, we have section 3, which is reports to the board. Dr. Gordon, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Fairgrieve. My comments tonight will be very limited, as most of our time has been spent on boundaries. But wanted to make sure our community, our families know that due to the recent emergency closures, be it weather or cold, the school year must be extended to meet the school code. Our last day of school is now Thursday, May 30th. So make sure everybody's planning accordingly. And that's as of today. Who knows what's in store for us later on. But make sure that we all understand that it's Thursday, May 30th now. On February 26th, our kindergarten registration opens. And then something on February 29th, we're going to have our Listen, Learn, and Return coming back. And this is going to be focused on our academic work that we've been engaged in over this past year and a half. We're excited to do that. That'll be at 6 p.m. at Haynes. Generally, I don't comment on public comments during my time, but I feel I need to around migrants being housed in our schools. That is not true. There's no truth whatsoever to migrants being housed or living in our gyms or anywhere else. That is not true. There's no truth to migrants being housed in our schools at all. Mrs. Fairgrieve, back to you.
Thank you very much for those comments. Now we will move to our board member committee reports. Can we start with business services?
I'm excited we get to go first this time. This is pretty cool. And Paul, don't jinx us on the school date, school year end date. Come on.
Let it be.
Since we last met as a full board, we've had 2 business services meetings, one the 29th and one February 5th. On the meeting of the 29th, we had a pretty good discussion around our boundaries, as well as a starting of the discussion around the intra-district transfer process. Board members gave some feedback to admin, and then we carried that on. I'll talk a little bit about that from the 5th. On February 5th, we had, again, boundary discussions. We also discussed the intra-district transfer process, and again, a little bit that this is a separation of the policy versus the procedure. And so we talked around understanding the importance of understanding the available seats per grade per school, as well as the prioritization of a reason for the intra-district transfer, what the selection process would be, the timing of when we would open the seats, and then when things would be decided. We also discuss how the change in our process works, so that an approval is a duration, approval for the duration of the student's time in elementary. Again, I really like that. That was something that's come up a number of times, right? People having to renew this every year, so that would alleviate a lot of that. Additionally, we discussed, and this is, I believe, an agenda item for tonight, the Davis Mobile refurbishment. So instead of doing a new mobile at Richmond, this would provide us some significant cost savings, allow us to keep a couple sections at Davis there. Also has additional benefits due to Davis staff being very familiar with the mobile and the security and how to manage and everything else. And then we would sunset the mobile at the end of next year's school year. So we would then have no mobiles. which is very exciting for me. Financial reports, both Mid-Valley is trending slightly ahead of last year's performance, and D303 is trending very close to last year's performance. We also introduced a new budget process, and what we'll have going forward is we'll have a series of workshops where each department will come forward and discuss their essentially 5-year budget to the board, helping us blend what the board's priorities are with our budgetary needs. We know that we have some significant challenges within our discretionary. We've a lot of things here, and there's been some asks about making sure that we maintain our budget and rein things in a little bit. So very excited for that process to get going. We also have the designation of Mr. Attaway, our COO, as the person responsible for budget. That's in consent agenda. We also walked through the fees and the increases that we have there. We talked about a couple of fees that have been flat for a number of years and where the increases are happening. You'll also see the Pushcoin agreement on the consent agenda. That's for the 3-year renewal, which locks in pricing at no increased per student cost. NHS uniforms, or football uniforms, which are past their end of life. The East uniforms were renewed, I believe, a year or two ago, so they are not up. And then finally, we also heard about it in public comment, the new buses as well as some new vans for us. That would completely eliminate any of the outside services that we are using to do a lot of that around. And then finally, we ended kind of with some Lincoln updates. On the build and abatement, there is a recommendation for that in tonight's agenda as well. And then district-wide access control. So we did ask Facilities Department to move that forward as a priority, so that improves the safety of our buildings, especially our secondary and middle school, as well as the admin building. Next year, we'll see more elementary stuff in there, but that is there as well. And then finally, it is in consent, the Dark Trace renewal, which is manages our networks, and for who's connecting to our networks, how they're using the networks, et cetera. So I think I've covered everything. Mr. Lackner, any additional color? Got it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lentz. Now, Learning and Teaching Committee?
Yep, my turn. It's nice to hear somebody else go first, so thank you, Mr. We met on January 16th. It was a meeting that had a changed agenda because of the boundaries. All board members were in attendance, Mr. Lackner via Zoom. We focused the entire meeting on the boundary issues, and so we made a change in the agenda for that meeting where we talked about the high school concept 2A and the middle school concept maps as well. The board in that first discussed it before we had community members weigh in. Clearly, through our discussion, the board felt that the concept of keeping the high school boundary the same, and we moved that. I'm sorry, I'm not as clear as I mean to be. We moved the concept 2 for the high school to tonight's meeting, and we moved the middle school concept 2 for tonight's meeting as well, which we will be voting on later. The board members then heard from 22 residents who spoke about the boundaries. Mostly were prepared to speak about the high school. Board members in their conversations also thanked the committee or thanked the community for all their support and their voicing their concerns throughout the process. After that discussion and community input, we then had Rob Schwartz from RSP came and spoke to us about the process that we went through and the survey results as well. Mr. Harvey also explained the survey results as well. Board members did ask for more information, which you can read in the minutes, since many of those questions have already been answered throughout the process. We had one other agenda item, which was the Davis-Richmond portable, and that, because of the lateness of the meeting, we decided to postpone that and moved it to business services, which Mr. Lenz just spoke on. Our next meeting is February 20th, which we will then have what we were supposed to do in January, which was the update of the Student Achievement Report, and that'll be our main topic.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McCabe. We had a policy committee.
We did indeed. So policy met back on January 29th at 4:45 p.m. We reviewed a number of policies, most of them just minor adjustments in language or compliance. And then we had some good discussion about 5 or so policies that have been moved for future discussion. Policy 230 rather, library media program. Policy 7-30, student assignment and intra-district transfer. Policy 7-160, student appearance. Policy 7-190, student behavior, and Policy 7-270, administering medicines to students. So those 5 policies will be moved for further discussion. The other 28 or so policies were moved forward for consent tonight. I encourage anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about that to review the meeting minutes and or the recording, or you can certainly contact the board or the administration for feedback. I believe our next meeting is to be March 21st at 4:30 p.m.
Thank you very much for that update. Do we have any update from DPTO?
Yes, everything feels like it was 3 years ago now. We did meet, I don't recall, it was in January 17. Dr. Gordon, Mr. Harvey, and Mr. Buxton were all in attendance along with me. All 3 did an amazing job of talking about the boundary process. There were good questions, great discussion. Dr. Gordon thanked them for the input that they bring to the table as well. We learned some new things about individual situations at different schools, which was really helpful to all of us. And I think Dr. Gordon took that back to help with the work that he's doing with the late start for next year. I just would like to let the board know that the DPTO folks are very committed people who work really hard for our district and our kids, and have been a great support throughout the whole time we've been going through this boundary. Not that they agreed with everything that the board was looking at, but they are really positive liaisons from what the district is doing to the families and community. So I think they're meeting again. We meet again next week on Wednesday.
Thank you for that update, Mrs. McCabe. Now, moving to section 4 on the agenda, which is for discussion. Before we start that off, I would like to just reset the framework in terms of we will not take a vote tonight on these items. This is for discussion only, and really in preparation for the special board meeting that we have scheduled tomorrow night, where we will take a vote on this particular or these particular topics. With that said, they're listed, each of the concepts or options are listed separately. I think for discussion purposes, they'll probably blend together, which I think is fine. If you could just, as you're making comments, though, try to be clear in terms of which one you're referring to at that time. I think it will help for clarity purposes. So with that, I don't know.
I'll take it from here and then hand it off. Thank you, Mrs. Fairgrieve. Yes, our presentation will also mix them all together as well. So it'll be one conversation. Dr. Igo, Mr. Buxton will walk through the presentation. What you will also see within the presentation are the new Concepts 4 and Concepts 5, but similar data points that we shared last week will be presented for those new concepts. I'm not sure who's kicking us off. Dr. Igo? Oh, Mr. Buxton. I had a 50-50 chance and I missed it.
Thank you so much. Tonight, Dr. Igo and I will be presenting 4 concepts to the board, 2 of which were presented at last Monday's meeting, Original Concept 2 and Revised Concept 2. In addition, the board asked us to look into a few other modifications, specifically maintaining Aintree and Squire Lane at Norton Creek, maintaining Pheasant Run Drive at Fearson Creek, and assigning the Springs to the Munhall boundary. The last concept this will be presented tonight as Concept 4, and then the last concept we'll present includes a combination of Revised Concept 2, where the Timbers neighborhood remains in Wild Rose Elementary instead of being assigned to Munhall, as well as the other modifications suggested in Concept 4. So this is the Concept 2 map that has been presented throughout our boundary timeline, all the way dating back to November. And this was a way we broke down the space utilization for Concept 2 building by building. So what we did is we applied the minimum space standards, and when we applied those space standards about core classrooms, elective non-core classrooms, flex space, Fearson Creek does not have the capacity to meet our enrollment needs by 1 classroom. We also have 5 buildings that do not have any flex space and 5 buildings that are able to meet the minimum space standards. It is important to note that the 24-25 school year has the highest enrollment projections in 10 of our 11 buildings, with Coron being the exception. Buildings will regain flex space as we move throughout the 5-year projection window.
So again, I'm going to speak about Revised Concept 2. This is a concept that we had talked about last time, and that is takes the original Concept 2, and revises it by moving the Timbers neighborhood back from Munhall back into Wild Rose's capacity. And so you can see here that this information does kind of highlight Wild Rose. Again, it would be overall their sections would increase by 1. We would see that while they are able to meet those enrollment needs, we have 2 grade levels that are pretty high to those board classroom sizes, with the potential to potentially split, and that there is no available flex space for that to occur at Wild Rose. And given the layout of the building, that makes putting those particular specials on a cart much more difficult. For Munhall, we see an overall reduction of 2 sections. This map does not exactly match what you saw last time. We made a few adjustments based upon district programming so that we were better utilizing our buildings. And that leaves Munhall with 1 additional flex space in comparison to the standard that was set. This slide here, you saw this last week, just highlights again where those sections are and in which we are concerned about potentially splitting into another section depending on move-ins. And this shows you exactly where they are down to and what those available spaces would be.
Can I?
You may.
On this one then, because one of the concerns that I had was the utilization of Munhall, right? And we've also heard, citizen comments tonight. With the movement of district programs, does that move us above the utilization percentage? Do we?
You mean that?
Yeah, because
you asked my question for me one more time.
Yeah, so we're classroom spaces. We're back up, right?
Yes.
We're back up. But this put us over 70% then in that building?
Using the
Yes.
classroom spaces with
Yes, it would.
with moving
Okay.
district programs around, yes, it would.
Okay.
It would.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excuse me, what district programs are being moved in order to accomplish that?
So we're looking across the board at different programs that are housed within our district, from some of our special education programs to others. but we want to make sure that we're communicating directly with our families before we're having that conversation here.
Can you, Paul, can you speak briefly regarding the citizens' comment we had about the resources that would be available in the event that we have underutilized schools, and how, if there's legitimacy to that thought?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think where it comes from specifically is when you think about Lincoln Elementary. Lincoln, you know, for many reasons, the board and administration made a recommendation. Board agreed with that recommendation to repurpose Lincoln. One of the bigger issues at Lincoln were the smaller, a smaller school, so at times they would have a 0.4 services. And oftentimes those were in the field where some of our students with IEPs would be able to access that service. Smaller schools, you do have less resources available to you. My email back to community members, you know, is if we stay in that 3 section, as we think about Munn Hall being a 3 section, I think it's very appropriate to think that that would have all the services that we would need to be able to accommodate our students there. But when we go much smaller than that, that's where we start seeing some issues arise around staffing, as we try to make sure that we're being incredibly thoughtful about our resources. But to a couple of the family members' point, we also need to make sure that we're meeting the IEP goals and all that is set out there. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. But given that we have 4 concepts here that we're looking at, and each of them have underutilized schools by our own measure, below 70%, is there risk for what we're discussing here occurring? Is that, where is that number where that would definitely impact? Below 60, below 50?
I think it's really around the number of sections. For us, it's really that sections that help us kind of determine, and that's really where we got into a challenging place at Lincoln, because at times we would have 2 sections or 1 section. So it became a greater challenge for us to be able to provide those. Dr. Igo?
Yeah, and I think it's important in terms of the sections. That certainly helps us to get an idea, but at the end of the day, it's individual. It's based on each individual student. And so we look within each building and we identify how many of those students have IEPs, what is an appropriate caseload, how many of them require speech, how many of them require social work. So all of those things also go into the calculation.
So I guess what I was trying to do here was maybe quell some of those concerns regardless of what the decision is this evening.
Did we help? Or did we?
Well, I guess we can ask the citizens who have been
but I'm
commenting.
glad Dr. Igo made that point, because it is a combination between the two. It's about the size, but the size also impacts the number of
students.
young people who potentially have an IEP. So they kind of go hand in hand, but Dr. Igo's overlay of it really helps to personalize it for our students.
And I think it's important, and I think with the parents, we're trying to communicate, and if I misspeak, please let me know. Really is like, we will make sure that the kids have what they need to meet their IEP goals, which might mean we have a 0.4 or 0.6 in a building, which that means that there are times that somebody might not be available, so their IEP minutes will be met and their needs will be met. But because of the way we might have to staff it, they might only be there Tuesday, Thursday. And if they need something Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that becomes an issue or a concern. I just want people, we will meet students' needs, but it's how those kind of play out that can be impacted.
Well, and that would be my biggest concern if we were failing to meet their needs because of underutilization. So thank you for that.
We will meet their needs.
Appreciate it.
So just a question on sections. So when you say it's about sections, we're talking about like if we have, let's say between 60 and 75 kids, there's still 3 sections.
3 section.
So in that case, the utilization or the availability of those people would not change.
Yeah, you know, again, I want to couple it with what Dr. Igo said. Generally speaking, once you have a 3 section, you're feeling pretty good about those numbers. If we think about young people nationally and within St. Charles, we're roughly about 10 to 12% of young people with an IEP. So then you're feeling pretty confident about that number if it's right in that 3 section. But again, it will always go back to the individual student and their needs. It's do we have an individual there on Tuesday or Monday through Friday? Or is it split up into different days? Does that help, board?
It does. I think I was going to just add that where we have a problem is when we have a building that's overloaded, right? And and that's something that I think, again, one thing that we talk about it. So it sounds like admin has really tried to get 3 sections across the board, and 3 sections meets our needs, right? The one point that I'll bring up is if we're overloaded, we have a harder time meeting the needs in those buildings because we're staffed for the 3 sections for that piece of it. So as we look at these concepts and we see parts where it blows out, I think we have to keep that in the back of our mind from a detriment of services. At least that's kind of how I'm starting to look at this.
Not to take us too far off track, but to tie into that point, and I know you still have more to present, but we are overutilizing or underutilizing schools, then I don't know what we're doing to going through this process. We can't continue to do that. That's the whole reason why we're here, because we had that imbalance. So we have to do our very best to streamline that so kids are getting all the services. They will get all the exact minutes. I hear what you're saying, but if it's at a slight detriment because they're not having the frequency, then maybe that's a problem. Or we're having to juggle staff. And so I think keeping it right where the sweet spot for special education is
for all of
ideal.
those things,
So
for all services.
Oh, correct,
Yeah.
correct. I mean, that includes AT
100%.
or whatever. So I really appreciate you guys kind of fleshing that data out because that helps me.
Well, and the spirit of that question was exactly that, because each of these concepts has both underutilized and overpopulated schools in the future at some point. So what I was trying to garner was how impactful is that going to be to students and or staff or resources, given that there isn't a single concept where that doesn't occur.
You're correct, Mr. Kuchert. At the end of the day, I'm going to go to where Dr. Igo finished. We're going to meet the needs of our students. We will meet the needs of our students. It may look a little bit differently at times, but we will meet the needs of our students. So thank you for continuing to push on that.
Based on board feedback, RSP looked at original concept 2 with modifications to Aintree and Squire Lane by taking them out of the Fox Ridge boundary and keeping them in their current attendance area of Norton Creek. This concept also keeps Pheasant Run Drive in Fearson Creek as opposed to Richmond, and reassigns the Springs to Munhall. So now we will start to work through some of RSP slides specific to concept 4. It is important to note that Anderson, Bell Graham, Coron, Davis, and Wasco, none of those 5 schools' projections are impacted in any future concepts. Some main takeaways from our student projections and student utilization percentages. Norton Creek has an immediate gain in projected enrollment that puts them up to 451 students for the 24-25 school year, putting them at 99% utilization. You'll see minimal relief. They get down into the 97, 99, then back to 98. So Norton Creek with the Aintree and Squire Lane back into the attendance area does keep them toward that 100% threshold of space utilization. Also, adding the Springs to Munhall does allow Munhall to maintain a utilization percentage in the 70s for the duration of the 5-year projection. Compared with original concept 2, when we look at demographics, concept 4 has minimal impact or changes on the demographics. Also, when we look at those feeder systems, middle school to high school, again, there are no changes compared to original concept 2. Here is the sheet that really shows the impact on where they are currently residing to where they would reside in concept 4. What you're going to see here is predominantly an impact on Fox Ridge and Norton Creek. You're going to see approximately 38 students drop out of Fox Ridge's attendance area projections, and those students pushed back into the Norton Creek attendance area projections. What you'll see here on this slide also is kind of a minimal impact of the Pheasant Run. By putting them back into Pearson as opposed to Richmond, you see a minimal impact there. So really, the only thing of note on this page would be that impact to Norton Creek and Fox, which I'll illustrate on the next slide. So going through the space utilization, just to be consistent with how we've walked through the other concepts, these minor tweaks, if we look at Pearson, there was not really a change to Pearson. There was an increase in one student, but it did stay consistent with our overutilized by one classroom. The thing to note would be Norton Creek. Norton Creek, with those 38 students and the way they are distributed across the 6 grade levels, it did require us to go up 2 sections in their grade levels, which puts them at 28 classrooms needed with 27 classrooms available, also putting them in a difference of 1. In that situation, we would need to consider designating art on a cart, music on a cart, or considering the LRC for Empower due to the lack of flexibility then at Norton. We also see that Fox Ridge, with Squire Lane and Aintree taken out of their attendance area, they do drop by roughly 38 students in that first year. The way that trickles through the other 6 grade levels, they would reduce by 2 sections in their projections. And in fact, it would get one of their grade levels where they are projecting to only be a 2-section grade level. Munhall did not, just very minimal impact, so we did not see a big change to Munhall.
Only thing I think I would add is around Norton Creek is that we don't see their enrollment decreasing over time, so we don't see that space problem being alleviated over time, where we do see it being alleviated over time with Pearson.
So this pulls out Norton Creek specifically and kind of walks you through the available spaces of enrollment. That first column shows their projected sections in original concept 2. The middle column shows their projected sections in concept 4. You will note that in both first grade and 5th grade, the numbers did warrant going up a section in those 2 grade levels. What you'll see in the far right-hand column is the number of spaces available for enrollment based on concept 4. So kind of like we did with Wild Rose, we just put in a little bit of a spotlight on 2nd grade and 4th grade, as 2nd grade in particular would be 5 student enrollments away from needing to do another consideration. Again, whether that's putting another special on a cart or employing cap and send due to us already being one space over the capacity.
But so, Jared, if I'm reading this right, we move in concept 4 here, we move just enough over to force the 4th section, and then we have 22 spaces available.
It's exactly right. So that 22 looks pretty ballooned, but that's because to your point,
we tripped. Okay, and
right.
same thing with 5th grade then as well.
Yeah, so in those situations, we may have been
and 3rd grade
4 or 5 under the cap, and then we go to 4 or 5 over the cap.
Okay.
And so it gets you those numbers.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And this does the same thing with Fox Ridge. So again, Fox Ridge was decreasing in enrollment in concept 4 because students were being taken out of the projections. You will see that in 1st grade, due to those numbers, we do only project a 2-section 1st grade at Fox Ridge in concept 4's boundaries. And we do see 5th grade in original concept 2 would be a 4-section grade level at Fox Ridge, and they would also trip down to a 3-section grade level.
So concept 5. And this really is where we combine both the revised concept 2 and concept 4 into one concept, so you can see how all of those play out together. So if you take a look here, those main takeaways really is that we see Munhall kind of coming, again, slightly underutilized. We see the same things that we saw before, where we have Wild Rose that's slightly over as well. when we look at our overall kind of demographics, we see again some of those demographics that have shifted. We do see percentages increase at Munhall, with Munhall and Richmond having kind of those highest and an increase by more than 10%. This kind of lays out how they would divide as we move into a feeder system of Concept 2 for middle and high school. And then this really tells us that we're going to impact a little under 21% of our students overall. Right, and this doesn't really look all that different than what we've been talking about. It just puts it all into one concept where Norton Creek continues to have an increase of 2 sections, not able to support the enrollment, and Fox Ridge sees a decrease, Munhall also sees a decrease, and Wild Rose remains the same with no available flex space. And that we have some really tight classes that are close to capacity at Wild Rose.
So this is a slide that, one of the things that we always think through an administrative lens is what's our next year enrollment, but then setting that up for that 5-year enrollment projections that RSP has provided us in each one of the concepts. What you're gonna see in this slide on the left-hand side is the projected enrollment for every school based on the 4 concepts that are on the table. You can see little nuances here and there, especially in the 6 schools that are impacted in these 4 concepts. As I stated, Anderson, Belgraham, Coron, Davis, and Wild Rose are consistent across. The other 6 schools, based on the concept, has some variation in their numbers. What you're going to see on the right-hand side is going to the end of those 5-year projections, what their expected enrollment is in each one of those concepts as well. So you can see, other than Coron, their projected enrollment actually increases almost by 50. Our other schools do get some relief as we go through the 5-year projection window. We just chose to kind of highlight any school that is projected to be at or above 500, just that gets you in a little bit of a state where you're having to make some space considerations.
And then this just provides a general summary, and that really just takes the information that was on all those individual slides and kind of summarizes it here for you so that there's just a quick and easy way to see what that looks like, so that you have that information easily in one spot.
Board, questions for us before you start your deliberation?
Okay, so I will, I guess, reiterate that.
Can I mention one thing real quickly?
course.
We had received an email regarding Charlestown Lakes. It's a new development. I think it's 167 units. Can you remind me where that space is allocated? As I look, I want to say it's currently at Norton, which would contribute to the overpopulation. And there were some suggestions regarding Munhall, but I wanted to make sure that I have that right.
It's at Norton Creek.
And that's currently in development, right?
That is the current, sorry. That is at Norton Creek, and that's currently in development.
Okay, so these projections then include the addition of those 167 units and the estimate of how many homes or families rather would be moving in?
Correct, because it was under development. They were, anything that was under development was included in RSP's numbers.
Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, that's right next to the springs too, correct?
Correct, it's kind of the springs, and then right around the corner is that development, Mr. Kuchar.
Okay, just I guess food for thought then, given that we're seeing underutilization in Munhall for the next 5 years and near overpopulation at Norton Creek, that might warrant consideration. I missed that last time.
Any questions, comments?
I do have a question about the Charlestown's Lake. Is that, 2 questions really. One, is that rental or owned?
My understanding of that one, it is single-family homes. It's not a lease or something along those lines.
And then when is that projected? Do we have when that's projected to be?
Yeah, I think we already
For
have
completion.
a handful,
Yeah.
but it's similar to what we heard earlier. It's about 8 months every time they turn around a new one for them, but it's again, a slower build
Yeah,
out.
I understand it's different
Yep.
than the ones that we're speculating on potentially being built. But I'm just wondering if there was any idea about when that was going to be completed.
If you drive by, you'll see the footprints. So some of the foundation, I think, has been put in. You can see where the plumbing's going. I don't know if they've sold any lots, but it's definitely being developed.
Do we know if RSP gave any consideration to that subtle movement of those units?
We did not. Honestly, what we did was get the board's feedback, and that's what we sent to RSP. We're trying to be very specific on what we were going to send to RSP.
But they were included in the concept development.
Correct. Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get at is if they're included, for numbers.
Yes.
Where do those numbers start coming in?
So as long as they're captured, so I'm just looking at concept two. They're captured, those numbers, the springs, the lakes, all of those are captured. Any development that was started, that was signed off by the city, that has those plans, those are included. I'll give you an example of ones that are not. Britcher Commons, those numbers are not included because that's not a plan that has been approved by the city. But anything that's been approved by the city, has been starting to build, RSP included those into every one of those concepts. Does that help?
So the Britcher, that's been taken out, but what I'm asking, I guess, is for the numbers that are included, are they included essentially as year one numbers for this, or are they kind of being?
Wherever they add in their development, that's when they'll hit.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at, so that I know what these projections look like relative to actual construction.
I'll go. I'll reiterate something I said at a previous meeting, and then kind of go with. I really hope that we can come to a consensus around one of these concepts tonight. I'll just say for the board, based on the numbers that I'm seeing here, I appreciate Mr. McNally's comments about the what's potentially projected in here. I think I don't like any of the plans that underutilize Fox Ridge in that piece of it. And I think where my head is at right now, I'm if it can be supported with not underutilizing one hall, I like the 2R concept. One, because it keeps Wild Rose walkable neighborhood there. Yeah,
Can I
go
just
ahead.
okay. I don't want to throw another acronym out
Okay.
there.
The 2R concept?
So you're saying revised concept two.
Revised 2,
Okay.
not 2A,
Okay.
2R,
Thank you.
revised.
Thank you.
I like that. To Mr. Kusher's point, we do not have a plan that solves every one of our issues, right? There's not one on the board that does it. There is not one that alleviates everything. And I think from what we discussed at the last business services meeting, to our concept in front of us, if we were to keep that intact, has a risk for us of cap and send. It has a risk of running out the thing, but it utilizes our buildings pretty well. I do appreciate Dr. Gordon and team for looking at different programming that could be potentially moved. I'm curious to see if where that programming could come from to potentially help remove other issues that we have in this plan, right? To make it even more palatable. And I know you guys will work diligently at that. But just from the number of students impacted to the proximity there, I like that plan the most. I I appreciate the concept 4 and concept 5, you know, for trying to help the community ask. I just, when we see it going in the red on these, and then we see the other pieces of underutilized, to me, we're not going to make everybody happy, and I wish we could. But I think of all the options, for me, 2 revised is where my head is at.
If I could just make one quick comment on that one, regarding the programs that would go into Munhall. The reason I asked the question I did is what I don't want to see is any one school or any one area being overburdened with every special program in the district. And we've seen some of that to this point. So as we look at that, I want to make sure that we're not saying, well, this area can take 1 more, 2 more, or 5 more special programs. We need to spread the wealth on that a bit.
Yeah, Mr. McNally, to your point, I think it's an important one, and one that we recognize that having multiple programs in any one school has a very, there's a large impact on the school. So we do recognize that, and we have thought accordingly to what you have brought up.
Well, I agree with Mr. Lenz. I am in favor of the concept 2 revised. I think I want to thank everyone who has participated, and I think that we have asked a lot of good questions. We got a lot of information back, but as we look at this, the revised concept 2 fits more into what I think is where we were headed and what we needed to do. Did we solve everything? No. Did we try? We tried. I think we also listened very carefully. Again, Dr. Gordon, I want to thank you for answering every email that came in, and doing so with the professionalism and with the empathetic tone that was necessary. It was a pleasure to talk to families. I'm often moved by letters from kids and stories about what's happening. I have great trust in our families that if they don't get what they want, they'll figure out how to make it successful for their kids. I also have a big trust that our principals and having seen groups of neighborhoods being moved to many different schools, the welcoming that happens and the work that goes into making everyone feel like they belong, even if they've never been there. I'm hoping that the intra-district process will alleviate some families' worries. I had hoped that we could house 5th graders, but that became clear that it wasn't. And I think that our building principals and 5th grade teachers will absolutely understand what it means to be new in that situation. So my thanks to everyone. I think it's time that we move forward and we get going with this. So I'm planning to vote on revised concept 2.
One of the challenges when you look at the map, and I don't mean any of the scenarios themselves, I just mean the map with each of the schools placed on it. If one was to draw, and many of the parents with whom I've spoken have heard this story, but I'm going to share it with the board. If one was to, as I've done on a large map in my basement, draw a 2-mile radius around each of the school buildings, because that would be a reasonable way to assume that we could pull people into the buildings, one recognizes almost immediately that most of those circles overlap, and they overlap in a dramatic way. And for schools like Corin and Anderson and Davis and Munhall and Fox Ridge, those circles get awfully small because we hit either the northern border of D303 or the southern border. And so the ability to simply say, hey, the closest students can go to this school is infeasible because of the physical layout of the buildings on the map. Wasco and Belgraham, as I look down, are a 1/4 mile apart. Munhall and Fox Ridge are a mile apart. These are the planning difficulties that we face. And so When we think about schools like Fersen Creek, almost no one walks there. When we think about schools like Anderson and its location, some can walk, most cannot. And that's true across a big portion. And so while I appreciate the challenge, there are some unique situations where walkability is present. And because of that, and in spite of the potential risk of overcrowding at Wild Rose, I can be supportive of revised concept 2 because of the uniqueness of that one walking situation. I think we do run a risk in revised concept 2 of a potential utilization challenge at Wild Rose. And so I'm hopeful that the coalescing of support around revised concept 2 is cognizant not only of that fact, but also of our ability as a board to monitor the utilization of that school and others, Munhall especially, for effective utilization. But one can only look at the map for a minute and see that a completely rectangular, circular, or other deployment is almost impossible. And so, to me, the revised concept 2 is the best compromise. And so that's where my support is presently.
Okay. So I think everybody kind of already knows my stance pretty well. But as I do a little bit of an analysis here between revised concept 2 and concept 5, it appears that they present approximately the same utilization challenges with the exception of Fox Ridge dipping under revised concept 2 and Munhall elevating enrollment under concept 5. So it appears to be a bit of a trade-off there. As I've said all along, if we're not going to set out to do precisely what we set out to do, then I would like to cause the least amount of disruption. I fully supported a plan prior to this that had significantly less disruption, but I won't beat that dead horse because that ship has sailed. However, concept 5 does impact approximately 5% less of the community, and given the fact that we will have utilization challenges either way, and we will have to be creative in order to solve those challenges, and I love what you said about ensuring that all students will get exactly what they need. I'm encouraged by that, but at the same time, disrupting the community as little as possible has been one of my biggest goals in all of this, and so I can see the support for revised concept 2, but I would support concept 5.
Mrs. Bell or Mr. McNally, do you care to provide any comments?
I need a little bit more time. I'm looking something up.
My,
then I can go.
Okay.
I can only say which one I dislike the least, or which ones, and it would be right now between 2A and 5, and I'm just not sure where I stand on that. I'm still dismayed that we have done nothing to address the wild outlier of low income at one school, and I do hope we do something to address that because that's an unsustainable number. So we need to do something. I understand we're not going to do anything with any of these concepts. We need to be vigilant, and we need to be looking at how we're going to address that issue. The rest of this, that would be revised 2 or 5, would probably be where I'm sitting.
Okay, thank you for that feedback and commentary, Mr. McNally.
I'm trying to look something up on my iPad. It's not behaving, so I need just another minute or two.
Okay.
Sorry.
I can tell you, especially since, from my standpoint, since I did not have the opportunity, I was unable to be at the Business Services Committee last week. So from my standpoint, I certainly echo a lot of the comments here. There is not one concept, one solution here that will address every need that we have, whether it be from the community standpoint or from our facilities standpoint. There's just a lot of variables and constraints at play. In looking at the data, though, for me, I support the revised concept 2. Is where I sit as well. And I think the things that stick out to me, even from the discussions tonight relating to the available flex space versus the standard and just our capacity, each of the buildings, I think that gives us the best starting out scenario. So with that, do you have anything you want to add, Ms. Bell?
I hate to say that at this time, I'm still completely, I'm not completely, I'm still not entirely out of solution. Not gonna go over that there is no good solution. There's no, perfect, I should say. I don't know if I'm hearing a clear, this is what the administration is supporting, so maybe you can, and maybe you said that and I'm just looking at all the numbers and juggling it all, but if you could kind of tell me what the recommendation is, and I'm not saying I'm making my decision solely on that, but there's
No,
no
you're
great
good.
solution, and I'm trying to put it all together.
Yeah, administration supports, we supported Concept 2 last week for the numbers, but we also recognize and was stated that we're comfortable in the Concept 2, Concept 2 revised as well. So we are comfortable in Concept 2, either revised or the standard concept.
Well, I may be the outlier. I am oscillating between 2 and 2 revised Concept 2 or 2 concept revised, that one, for the following reasons, and just so that it's very clear. I went to Wild Rose, I went to Lincoln. I love those neighborhoods. And when I went to Wild Rose, I was a walker and lived in Farmington, which is crazy. If you know where that is, it's over by Norris High School. So I understand that Timbers have gone to Wild Rose for 40 years from the beginning of both of those neighborhoods. I'm having a hard time being able to think that we are going to have to cap and send. I'm not quite sure what the reasoning is behind why there's differences in the numbers of when it was calculated. Also, that's not clear to me because it could become a non-issue based on whose set of numbers you're looking at. So that confuses me a little bit. I think that I do not want to, I got a call from a community member who does not have children in the district anymore. They've graduated and moved on. However, this person is a realtor, and they said that if we are going to get into a situation where we go with revised Concept 2, that puts, and this sounds silly, but this puts realtors in a legal predicament in that they are listing a house, and it says what elementary school they go to, and if we end up in a cap and send situation, we are now putting them in a legal predicament because they are not legally representing the property correctly. Now, do we need to solve that? No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that's one of the things that really bothers me is cap and send.
Respectfully, Mrs. Bell, that's something that happens today, and so that situation is already occurring. So it's not a legal issue that the district has to be concerned with. That's already occurring.
Well, I'm not saying
current
that
enrollment.
that is something that we need to be aware of and make our decisions based on legal predicaments of a realtor. What I'm saying is these are all the things that I'm trying to take into consideration because I'm not comfortable cap and sending and because you're just saying someone moving into a neighborhood, this is my particular opinion, that I don't feel great about saying, welcome to this neighborhood, your kids can't go here. And that may be 1 or 2 children versus all the other parents from the Timbers, but I'm trying to think about what does that do to that family? I would not be happy if I moved into a neighborhood and that's,
Mrs. Bell,
I would have to do that.
what are you referring to related to the cap and send risk
If we-
specifically for revised Concept 2?
with
What data?
regards to grades, I don't know which paper it is, I'm sorry. Grades 2 and 5, when, hold on. Let me get there, 1 second.
I
Grades.
mean, we do have
2 and-
additional seats of 4 and 5. Granted, it's
Here it
a
is.
slimmer margin.
Grades 2 and 5, we do. But if we have too many kids that move in, then we're capping and sending. So that, I don't enjoy that prospect of it, but I also don't enjoy making any families move. So it's, I don't know how else to put it. It's not really a lesser of two evils. That there is no really great solution. And I'm trying to wrap my head around, do I support 2 or revise 2? Because I don't support any of the others. So I'm having a hard time getting behind concept 2 revised. However, I'm okay being on the other side of the consensus because it's the will of the board.
Of course.
So.
Yeah, of course. I
you
was
know.
just trying to clarify what data you were looking at to come to that. Because in some of the other concepts, we do have some slim margins, different schools.
Yeah, I was looking at
as well.
all of that and all of the yellow schools that have the limited room for growth. And I appreciate the administration pulling up some of that data just to make it clear. And in trying to go back and forth between all these pages, there just isn't a great answer. There isn't a concept that ticks all the boxes for all the right reasons. And for that point, I still need to think a little bit longer. I'm between
Sure.
2 and 2 revised.
Sure. And the
That's
other-
where I'm at.
Okay, and I appreciate that.
It's a really long way to say that.
That's okay. That's part of the objective of this discussion. The other thing I would note, though, I don't think anyone on this board or even prior like the concept even of capping and sending. It's
I would
a very
agree with that.
frustrating situation. But remember, we do also have the capability on the D303 website that anyone at any time can put in the address and identify what their school is.
Right,
Regardless
for
of
sure.
what
A
they hear
realtor
from
says or
a
does.
friend,
Yep,
neighbor,
gotcha.
whomever.
Right. I'm trying to make this decision based on not wanting to put boards in this position again very soon, because we've just been here, I mean, not just, but 6 years ago, and I don't want to overutilize schools. I don't want to underutilize schools. And for me, 2 is what gets us there in that. And we're having, again, what I said earlier, we are having this conversation and have been for months because we were overutilizing and underutilizing. And we've only fixed it a little bit by altering Fox Ridge and Lincoln. That, reopening Fox Ridge as a full elementary and closing Lincoln. I'm just not sure yet. It's one of those 2. I'm sorry.
No, you don't, there's no need to apologize at all.
Well, I would love to have an answer. I do not.
Appreciate that. So with that, I do want to give the board if there's any member that would like another opportunity to speak or has additional comments at this time. Otherwise, we'll move to the next section on the agenda.
Well, it appears that 4 of the board members here have voiced support for one of the concepts. Am I not correct there?
Mhm.
There you have it.
But again, I would remind everyone on the board, and I think, that you're already aware, but we're not voting at this time. We do have the next approximately 24 hours until the special board meeting that we have tomorrow night, where an actual vote will be taken. So,
Can you clarify in that process if we will be bringing one concept to vote on? Because if that's the case, then I think we have already gathered what that concept would be, correct? Even in spite of not having a vote, people can still vote at their, their
that's
choice.
correct, but there's always an option for any board member to change how they would vote on that concept tomorrow night.
Okay, but is
well,
that what we had done here today by then that's the concept that will be brought forth? I'm just confused.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just make one quick final comment. Just the reason I have kind of a quandary between revised 2 and 5 is that I do appreciate the fact that 5 does impact fewer people. However, I don't know, I need to take a look more at the numbers and kind of look at more sustainability of the concepts over time, so, but that is the appealing thing to Concept 5 for me.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. McNally.
But to clarify, we are only taking action tomorrow on elementary,
That's correct.
correct? So
because
we're
we-
taking action on middle and high school tonight.
That's correct,
Right.
per our agenda.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I was making sure I was reading that correctly. So tomorrow we will only be voting on whatever we have consensus on tonight. We will not be voting on
What we will be doing tomorrow night is we will put one concept forward, and this is based on reading initial comments, what we will put forward. At the vote tomorrow night, certainly, board members could change their mind, they have the opportunity to do that, and the concept could be voted down based on whatever, however board members vote, or it could also be voted forward.
which would send us back to the drawing board.
If it
Correct.
did not reach majority tomorrow night, the concept, that's correct. Yeah, but.
Would we want,
that's-
okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I thought we were voting on all,
No.
one by one. Okay,
So for clarity, administration will write the motion to approve revised concept 2. That will be the motion that will be in front of the board for action tomorrow night.
okay, well then I'll simplify things. I would clearly be on the other side of the vote, which, on the other side of the consensus, sorry,
And
so.
that's- And Kate, that's, Mrs. Bell, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm
Everyone-
okay with that. It is what it is. I just don't have to belabor it, whatever the word is, by, torturing myself and trying to make a decision, because I don't need to. If the consensus of the board and the will of the board is to put forward concept revised to revise, you know what I mean? Then I don't need to really, scour over, my opinion and the details, and I can get behind revised too.
Yeah,
That's
it's
fine.
functioning the same as in this is a discussion item similar to what we would normally handle in a committee type structure. And so we will put one concept forward for a vote. It certainly is up to the board, and each one of you individually have the opportunity to vote on what has been put forward as you see appropriate. And then after that vote tomorrow, then it will be determined how we move forward. If there is not majority support for what's put forward, then we will come back and we will regroup and we will continue to have additional discussion or a different approach.
Gotcha. I think at this point that, not having the dates specifically in front of me, but I feel we really don't have a lot of leeway if we want to take action for, this coming fall, the next school year, right? So
Yeah,
we
I
do
mean-
need to make a decision tomorrow. So-
Certainly.
And I'm in support of that.
Certainly timeline is a consideration, but at the end of the day, the board in plurality needs to be comfortable with the decision that's made.
Agreed.
Okay.
Me personally, I feel like I need to make a decision, so.
Okay.
Then I guess it's decision made for me, consensus. I will go along with the consensus and revise 2R.
Okay.
Sorry, you know what I
Okay.
mean.
All right, so with that, we'll move to section 5 on the agenda, which is our consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 5A through 5S?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Thank you, Mr. Kusher, for the second. Is there any discussion on this motion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Okay, moving to section 6 on the agenda, which is for action. Item A is middle school boundaries. Can I have a motion to approve the middle school boundaries concept 2 map effective with the 2024 to 2025 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Thank you, Mr. McNally, for the second. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kusher,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. Moving to item B, high school boundaries. Can I have a motion to approve the high school boundaries Concept 2 map effective with the 2024 to 2025 school year?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz.
Second.
Is there a second, Mr. Kusher? Thank you. Is there any discussion? Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kusher,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. Moving to item C, Davis Mobile Remediation and Improvements. Can I have a motion to approve the Davis Mobile Remediation and Improvements?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Any discussion at this time?
I have a question regarding the, we have a time certain in 1 year for removal of these.
Correct.
I'm asking this question because I have heard on those exact mobiles 3 times certain in their life that they were gonna be removed. And all those times have come and passed. I've heard the same about several other mobiles that ultimately have been removed. So I want to know for certain that we are eliminating mobiles in this district.
Any other discussion at this time? Or questions?
Is there any chance that there's much variance in the cost of this project?
It hasn't gone out to bid yet, so
That's my
there's
concern.
there's always that variance in this world of construction that continues to, fluctuate. I think once we're out to bid, we'll have a much better understanding. But so far, I think what could give the board some comfort is the work that Wold and our construction manager just
Wait.
jumped out. Pepper.
Wait.
Have done in previous work. We've come in or right around that budgeted item when we did our bids for Lincoln and Haynes. So I feel comfortable with Wold's work there.
Sorry, Mr. Kushert, are you asking about the Richmond piece, or are you asking about the contract that we're voting on for the remediation?
So, yes, I'm
Yeah,
asking about
so we're,
this
oh, I
specific.
apologize. You answered.
I apologize.
Yeah,
I was going big picture. I
So-
apologize.
But
Yeah.
I appreciate.
No,
your-
we have a
Yes.
final estimate for this. This is the final contract to actually do all the remediation on this.
And
So no,
no changes.
yeah.
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Kuchar.
And
I thought
the spirit of the question is just because I have, some concerns about the multitude of projects that we have going on and the expenses associated with them on an already very tight budget. So I just wanted to
No,
seek
I apologize.
clarification.
This is an approved. If the board takes action tonight, this will be the cost for this remediation. And Mr. Lentz, thank you for
Yeah, thank you.
interpreting for me.
Any other questions or comments on this item?
No, I just second Mr. McNally's thing about removing this at the end of the year, so.
Okay. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mrs. McCabe. Whoops, Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
No.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kusher,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 6-1. Item D, Lincoln Building Construction. Can I have a motion to approve the construction contracts for the renovation of Lincoln School to the recommended vendors, which the board recognizes as the lowest responsible bidders for the respective contracts, and further assign the contracts to the board's construction manager, Pepper Construction?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. McNally?
No.
Mrs. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lackner?
Abstain.
Mr. Lentz?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes. Motion passes, 5 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstain. Moving to item E, Lincoln Abatement. Can I have a motion to approve the contract with Weaver Construction Group for abatement services at Lincoln School?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Any discussion at this time? Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mrs. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lackner?
Yes.
Mr. Lentz?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item F, School Bus Purchase Fiscal Year 2024 to 2025. Can I have a motion to approve the transportation vehicle purchases and authorize administration to sign all necessary documents related to that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. Any discussion on this item?
Just on this one, I want to say that I'm excited that we'll finally get this going and get this in-house, so.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. Kuchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lackner?
Yes.
Mr. Lentz?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mrs. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item G, District-Wide Access Control Project Phase 1. Can I have a motion to approve the District-Wide Access Control Project Phase 1?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. McNally and Mr. Lentz for the second. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. Lackner?
Yes.
Mr. Lentz?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mrs. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuchert?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Moving to section 7 on the agenda is for information. If you haven't seen, or just a reminder, there are 5 items included in your packet this time. We have the District 303 financial budget, we have our Mid-Valley financial report, Freedom of Information Act requests, and district enrollment as our standing items. You will also see in there, we have revised 2023-24 and 2024-2025 school calendars. And just to reiterate what we heard in the superintendent's update, the 2023-2024 school calendar, which is for this year, this school year, has been updated to reflect the emergency days that are added to the calendar. So May 28th, 29th, and 30th will be our last day. Okay? And then also note the 2024-2025 calendar has the election day that's been added as a non-attendance day based on our new state law. Okay. Any new business at this time? Okay. Do we have any citizen comments? And yes, we do. May I ask Bobby Rail to come forward? And as she's doing that, Mr. Lackner, could you read the preamble?
Sure.
Well, that's okay. We
I appreciate
have to
that.
do it. We appreciate
During the
that.
public comment period, members of the public body who wish to speak are asked to first state their name and the community in which they reside. Each individual will have up to 3 minutes to address the board on a topic of their choosing. We ask all individuals who address the board to do so with respect and civility towards others. Please note that personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. We also want to inform our speakers that all regular, special, and committee meetings are live streamed and available for viewing at any time on the district's YouTube channel. Personal information should be considered before making a statement that will be recorded and made public. While the board will not respond to today's public comment during this meeting, we are committed to listening to you to help support our work for the district on behalf of our students, families, staff, and community members. Thank you.
The board and the superintendent haven't done boundaries since 2007. That's 17 years ago that we did district boundaries. I know because I was president of the board then. It is never an easy process. 17 years ago, that means if you're going to do it correctly, you are going to have to move children. It's not about the minimum number because you may not get the job done correctly. You have spent 4 months actively discussing this. It's time to call it done. I hope that since the superintendent said he can support the revised 2, and you have the majority, you need to be done tomorrow night because the mainstay of this board is to balance the budget and get your head on academics. You need to be done with boundaries. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. Okay. Certainly.
Thank you for that. It'll be brief. I just have a recommendation that as you move forward with your budgetary process, you have workshops with staff. I'd recommend workshops or adding it as another session to listen, learn, and return or something to that sort with the public so that public can have understanding. They can understand the parts that are involved, make recommendations, and perhaps think of things that sometimes when you get involved in your own world, which I'm guilty of in my own job from time to time, you can have outside recommendations and thoughts to consider, and it might abate some of the things that you just went through with the boundaries and whatnot. So just workshops or opportunities for the public to take part. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn the February 12th, 2024 school board meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Lentz?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mrs. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lackner?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave?
Yes, motion passes 7-0. February 12th, 2024 regular meeting of the school board is adjourned.